Peter Myers remarks in The Sound of Finnegans Wake that elusive at the best of times, tone is in the wake the haziest element of all. Nevertheless, this vocal aspect of language is crucial for discerning between radically disparate meanings. Take the infamous example of Oxford comma usage. Let's eat, Grandma, versus let's eat, Grandma. The comma aids in guiding the reader to place the stress on the proper elements, yielding an appropriate tone. Without the comma, the invitation to Grandma to come eat can still be conveyed, but not exclusively. Without the comma, there's an irresolvable ambiguity at the level of the sentence that can only be solved in writing by context clues from additional sentences. Even then, it is possible to have a very dense context of surrounding sentences that still leaves the possibility of the cannibalistic suggestion as a valid rendering of the sentence's meaning. As such, when punctuation is taken out, ambiguity and indeterminacy of meaning sets in, or rather, is shown to be ever present in the nature of syntax and requires signifiers of vocalic discourse, that is, punctuation, to reduce and or eliminate such ambiguities. This creates a peculiar case when analyzing James Joyce's Finnegans Wake. For it's commonly acknowledged that its language approaches the vocality of speech and relies on and exploits the subtleties of speech for much of its wordplay and various verbal mishaps. The very indeterminacy of language and the frequent happenstances of spoken slips that characterize everyday speech are Joyce's principal devices taken advantage of in forming the variegated fabric of the Wake. And yet, far from this leading Joyce to minutely index the nature of spoken discourse through precisely placed punctuation, there is on the contrary a tendency to elide, if not eliminate, these signifiers, placing the reader irremediably in the midst of that very spoken confusion. Just like a speaker who has unintentionally uttered a double entendre or engaged in a Freudian slip, one may only belatedly realize the ambiguity in one's speech that allowed for meaning beyond one's intention to shine forth to one's audience. That is, assuming one ever realizes the slippery additional meaning implicated in one's speech. Finnegans Wake accentuates this indeterminacy of signification by valorizing speech as writing. To be more specific, Joyce valorizes the indeterminacy of the spoken word by rendering it into the written word. In so doing, one is forced to see laid out in front of one the necessary signifying connections of syntax that allow for meaning to be induced. By seeing the relationships formed among written words, one is forced to cope with the ambiguity of the word, since it is not the word alone, but its structural relations with other words and sentences that yields meaning. Furthermore, these syntactical relationships are themselves indeterminate when one attempts to convert them to semantic relationships. That is, syntactic functions are not self-sufficient enough to account for meaning, since one must also consider the pragmatics of the sentence. As such, Joyce valorizes the pragmatic nature of speech by rendering it into writing, laying bare the inadequacy of syntax to account for meaning. The reason this is so is that we were being too narrow earlier when it was said that it is not the word alone, but its structural relations with other words and sentences that yields meaning. Additionally, it is the context those sentences are in that determine their semantic value. Typically, authors steer away from the sort of syntactical ambiguities of the Oxford comma example in order to eliminate the resulting semantic ambiguities. And when they do accept such syntactic ambiguities, the surrounding context is used to buttress a particular meaning, aiding the reader in coming to one meaning rather than another. Joyce, however, often purposefully avoids this. Rather than presenting the reader with a series of determinate syntactic channels, which seamlessly merge into desired semantic channels, Joyce provides a surveyor's view of words as localized nodes, forming a variety of possibilities of association. When put in confluence to form motifs, phrases, and sentences, these possibilities exponentially multiply to form dizzying arrays of ambiguous semantic possibilities at the level of the proposition that cannot be reduced in a one-to-one way to the syntactic configurations that gave rise to those meanings. Joyce makes this explicit by impoverishing the sentence, stripping it of its syntactic scaffolding, that is, punctuation, in order to purposefully accentuate the latent ambiguities present at the level of sentences, such as with the Oxford comma example. Now, why does Joyce do this? Well, simply put, it reinvigorates the reader as a pragmatic terrier with a text imbued with the variety of possibilities that characterize life's spoken discourses. In highlighting the indeterminacy of syntax at the level of the sentence, Joyce stresses the necessary yielding of the word as an element of performance. What is meant by this should be obvious to the everyday speaker of language. There are a variety of possible ways to say a sentence using exactly the same words. Merely changing the stress, the prosodic value of respective words, yields a resultant meaning irrevocably connected to the choices of a speaker to perform a sentence in a particular way. To invigorate his readers' appreciation of spoken discourse, therefore, Joyce valorizes the word as an ambiguous element of vocal performance. Doing so allows for a focus on the happy accident, the o felix culpa that reverberates throughout the wake, that is, stress and tone, and invites the reader to see each sentence as already multiple, consisting of a variety of possibilities. Using one's skill as an everyday wielder of this complex apparatus that is language, the reader of Finnegans Wake is invited to team out the implications of vastly different meanings, each of which hinge upon the subtleties of stress and tone that spoken vocal discourse demands. Let us take as an instructive example 2 sentences from Finnegans Wake. Just one moment, a pinch in time of the ideal, musketeers. Now, there are 2 optional renderings of this sentence, which hinge on the difference of tone and stress. In the first, our object of study is the concept of the moment, which is ideal, the equivalent of a pinch in time. Just this and nothing more is of concern. On this account, these 2 sentences express a micro point of view. Joyce is interested in the microscopic dynamics of the smallest ephemera, the smallest slivers of what it is possible to talk about. Hence, just one moment, a pinch of time in the ideal. That is all that we are talking about. Now, the second optional rendering says that our object of study is deferred altogether. Hence, just one moment doesn't index an object of interest, but begs the reader to delay for a moment. It's telling us to wait. In the second sentence, we can interpolate implied punctuation to accentuate the deferral, a pinch in time of the ideal, musketeers. On this account, the sentence is insisting that we hold our horses, that we're like eager musketeers trying to cut to the chase too quickly. And we are reassured that, all in good time, we will be told the object of study, which itself is as ephemeral as a pinch of the ideal, and difficult to pin down. On this account, these 2 sentences express the fact that any matter of fact that a sentence supposedly refers to is in fact ephemeral and can never be fully indexed. The very object that all discourse refers to is always being deferred, since every concept is as ephemeral as a pinch of the ideal. Key for our analysis here is that these have exactly the same syntactic values that they reference. They just render that syntax differently through the pragmatics of speech that hinges on stress and tone. Through these differences of stress alone, a pragmatics of language yields vastly disparate meanings which don't necessarily reconcile with one another. These are saying very different things depending on our rendering, and either way, both can be seen as valid readings. The importance is the indeterminacy and the fact that each syntactic configuration gives rise to a variety of meanings. So that being said, that's it for this lecture. I hope it's been somewhat interesting in thinking about these ideas. You can check out any of my other lectures on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other classic literature. You can also become a channel member for $5 a month and gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom, which you can tailor to your needs. I also have super thanks if you'd just like to donate to the channel, because it really helps me out, and I appreciate everyone who donates to help me do this channel. That being said, that's it for this lecture, and I will see you in another one.